Hey guys, it's Protoss here with Gaming, and we're gonna bring you part 2 of Fighter Micro and how to position your fighters and whatnot. So, to start off, we're gonna spawn in some carriers here. So we have power to show different types of fighters. So the first one I'd like to get into is the normal autocannon fighter. Now, what makes this a good choice is autocannon is it's not a super heavy weapon, so your fighters can go pretty fast with it, and it deals 40 damage, which is really strong on a fighter. And the 40 damage it deals is in a burst, so I'll go show here. So each pellet it shoots, I believe, does just a few damage, just a little bit. It shoots 5, so each pellet does like 6, 8 damage. So the autocannon shoots like that. And that's good on a fighter because it gives it amazing anti-heavy capabilities. For example here, against these little nukes, it's not too effective because only 3 or 4 of the bullets hit. But if you want to spawn a larger ship, it deals all its damage versus tanks, which is autocannon's primary purpose as a fighter weapon. Yeah, here we go. So if I swing these around here, each fighter deals 40 damage in one burst, and it's probably 10 fighters, so that's 400 damage right here. And so 400 damage, they consume 3,600. No, they consume only 1,700 energy per shot, so they can shoot twice on one battery. Look at that. They took this brick down a big chunk of its health for just being fighters. A lot more than light beam would have, because autocannons are a lot more energy efficient. So the next type of fighter we have are EMP fighters. Now, EMP fighters are a bit weird in the sense that they actually have really shitty alpha damage. So they're not meant to kill your targets. So this ship right here is actually, I would say it's pretty good against them, as it has a lot of energy regeneration. So like we can get a high battery target. Now you can see these EMP fighters, I believe, will drain how much energy? They'll drain 40 to 100 energy from the enemy per shot. So what they're really good at is depowering the enemy ships and letting your higher DPS warships take care of it. So that's ships like your cruisers and your battle carriers just come in and absolutely destroy the enemy ships because they can't fight back. So that's kind of where EMP fighters excel at. Now, a bit of let's see it. The autocannon fighter was 44, just like the light beam fighter we featured last episode, and the EMP fighter was minimal because it's just kind of meant to go in and die. So it only costs 38, which is as cheap as you can get a fighter. And the next fighter we have is a demi-spinal light beam fighter, and this one is considerably more expensive at 61, and it's considerably less maneuverable than the other ones because it has a lot of armor on it, because you want to protect your investments. So the demi-spinal gives light beam an additional 250 range and allows it to get a few shots off on the enemy fighters before they hit you. So if we bring out just five demi-spinal fighters and 5 normal fighters here, we'll see that if he were to run his fighters into these demi-spinal fighters, they would get shredded up because light beam fighter is really fast, so he gets to take 3 or 4 shots before he even gets to fire one. And so they're one of the more dominant forces in light beam fighters, which is good, but they're a large investment. Now, another advantage about them is that if they're pursuing a ship, they can stay outside of flak range, so they're not taking that damage. And that's also true for autocannon fighters. If they're pursuing a ship, they don't go inside its flak range if it has a flak on it, which is very useful when you want to chase off a heavy kite. Yeah, so this ship here, if I bring these demi-spinal fighters around, it'll stay out of range of that flak. Oh. See, they're gonna shoot it, and the flak on the back can't hit them because they have that additional range. So that's kind of how demi-spinal fighters work, and how they're really strong in the fighter game. But they're definitely one of the more costly fighters you can do. Now up next we have one of my personal favorite fighters. It's a double autocannon fighter, and it's very similar to the normal autocannon fighter, but it has two, so its damage gets done twice as fast. And so let's note it has 40 health. The normal autocannon fighter only has 35 health, so it actually has more health despite not having any armor on it. But it's considerably slower, only moving at 222 meters a second, while the normal autocannon fighter is almost 70 meters a second faster than it. So let's go show how this damage. Let's go show on this damage brick how it's relative to. So this was all the damage done by the normal autocannon fighters, and you can see that's the same amount of damage, but it was all at once instead of spread out over 8 seconds. Which is when you want to take down a good big target, it's really good. Yeah. Other than that, they're the same as other autocannon fighters. Last episode we showed light beam fighters and what you can do with them and the basics of Fighter Micro. If you haven't seen that video, go watch it. Other than that, nothing's changed with them. They're still really strong, and you're solid all-around option. So let's look at a really good fighter here. Let's look at premium fighters. Now these guys are tricky. Let's take a look at them in design first. So what I have in mind is I have a light beam mounted on a Micro 360. So we're making the light beam's range abysmal. So it's a melee unit. And it has lightweight armor, which is something on most ships I highly don't recommend. But here it's really good because for 32 health, you're adding 2 tons to your ship, which is nothing. And it has 65 health in total. It's going at almost 500 meters a second. It turns pretty fast, but it's still on 1 battery. Now, it being on 1 battery is pretty critical here because it keeps the cost down. So let's note it costs 103 for one of these little fighters. But with that 103, I can come kill all these little fighters here. You can just circle around them real fast like. And I lost $103 to him losing almost 250. So that's one of the places where premium fighters excel at. Another case would be, let's say I have 15 because we're getting into that phase of the game where you're just kind of stacking up before an engagement and you need lots of fighters and you choose premium fighters. What you can do with them is come in here. Can you clear those nukes away so I can show this? You can come in here, and one of my favorite things to do with them is to do a carrier snipe. So I'm gonna come in, kill all his stuff, and then I'm gonna snipe his carrier so he doesn't get any energy during the fight. And that's how you that's the primary use of premium fighters in a fight, is to snipe important units. And they see they're all out of energy, but that doesn't really matter if you've killed other stuff and they're forced to surrender. Your premium fighters being out of energy doesn't really matter then. Now, when it does matter is when you're trying to repetitively just come in and kill stuff off, because you can snipe multiple things with them if you keep them alive through all your fights. All right, now I don't want to do this, but we're gonna cover auto fighters. Now these um auto fighters are fighters with AI, and so auto fighters are typically demi-spinal fighters, um, autocannon fighters. They're not really normal light beam fighters, as they kind of don't work with AI because they don't have any innate advantage for the AI to take advantage of, as it has pretty bad micro, so it needs a little helping. So let's focus on this Torp auto fighter I have. And torpedo auto fighters. Well, let's think of it this way. The AI in the fighter is meant to reduce your micro that you're doing, because if I spawn, let's say 20 of these fighters, because they only cost 42, like before a fight starts, so they get there as the rest of my fleet's engaging. I can't micro 20 fighters at once. That's not something that I don't think anybody's capable of, and that's um really where the auto fighters have the advantages when you're trying to use your more maneuverable units to get them into ever so slightly better positions, like in between their reloads. So if you micro a torp boat between in its reload, so it's body blocking for your carrier, you won't have time to micro this fighter because your attention and APM's over there. So let's spawn a few of them. Now, the way in which I like to use these um, isn't to. I don't like to engage with these ones head on, because I feel that creates a lot of room for heavy point defense to just go to town on them. I like to bring them out to the sides and engage with my brawlers up front as these torpedo fighters come around the sides. What are they doing? Do I have AI on? Yeah, I do. Oh, it doesn't have more DPS than one. Okay, so the way I have the commands on them, they don't kite things without weapons. And that brick has no weapons, that's why they weren't attacking it. Now let's so if you remember the EMP fighters from earlier, the auto EMP fighter is very much is the same principle, very much the same principle as the EMP fighter. It's meant to just depower ships, but I gave AI to this one because I'm too lazy to micro sometimes, so it just saps all the power, and then you can come and kill with other ships. So that's all the types of fighters. Let's let's cover nukes and how to micro against them, because that's something you need to know. So there's three different kinds of nukes that you have to watch out for when your fighters are together and clumped up. You have to look out for normal nukes, which just straight up kill your fighters. You have to look out for giraffe nukes, which also straight up kill your fighters, but they function a little bit differently, and it's weird, so we're going to go over it differently. And then you have EMP nukes, which just depower your fighters, but if we look at here, this EMP nuke only costs $84 as opposed to the others. So we have the giraffe nuke, which is 153, and the normal nuke clocking in at almost 300. And they all accomplish the same purpose. Now my preference on the nukes is the EMP nuke, but they're all viable options and I've seen them all used well. Let's just put these fighters back here. Alright, so I'm going to spawn myself a bunch of fighters, and you're going to run a nuke at them. Let's go with just normal light beam fighters. So first let's do just a normal nuke. Fairly standard warhead nuke. So to micro against this nuke, so let's hypothetical here. Let's say I have all my fighters grouped up because as we covered in the first episode, fighters grouped up is the strongest they're gonna be. He sends a nuke out at my fighters. The first thing I'm gonna do is spread them. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna peel one off and F command it onto this nuke. Now what's that gonna do? It's gonna force that nuke to back off, or sacrifice $300 worth of parts for this less than $50 fighter, which isn't a favorable trade. And with nukes, they don't have any other way of making value besides trading for cost, so it's very critical for them that they kill at least 6 fighters. So let's do that a little bit faster now. So I'm coming in with my nuke, with my fighters here. Nuke comes out. Nuke comes out. I see it. Yeah. So when you're playing with your fighters, you wanna be watching their nukes. So if I see any of his nukes move, he's got a bunch of them here because we're gonna show them all off. But if I see any of these move, I'm just gonna immediately spread out my fighters to try and avoid that. So that's basic nuke counterplay. That's kind of what you want to be doing against these giraffe nukes and the EMP nuke and the normal nuke. Against the EMP nuke, it's a little bit different story. It depends on what you want to do with your fighters. If you're pretty much done with them and they're all out of energy, that doesn't really matter. Don't worry about it, because you can't subtract from 0. Well, you can only go so far negative. It's like minus 4 seconds of regeneration you can go. So these things will be missing. They'll be missing a few. They'll be stomached for about 4 seconds, which isn't bad if they get hit. Not terrible once they're out of energy if they get stun locked. What was I saying? Oh yeah, right. So so the point of this nuke is to stun lock them, and they have fighters to take advantage and kill your fighters that can't fight back. So you still want to intercept these the same way. They're just a lot faster. So let's look at speed numbers here. Swap those in. This normal nuke travels at close to 700 meters a second. It's not exact, but it's up there. So it's really fast. This one, it's not quite as fast actually. But you know what's scary about it? It costs $84. That's what's terrifying. It'll depower all your fighters for $84. So he can take 2, and then he can ram them into different sections of my line here. 2 of the EMP nukes. And he puts 1. So if he divides my line of fighters in half and puts 1 in the middle of each, he'll depower what is practically all my fighters for like $160. So see, that's what. Let's think here. That decom that attack decommissioned one, two, three, four, five, six, seven, eight. 8 fighters, completely useless to me because they're out of energy. And yeah, it cost him $160. Those 8 fighters cost me close to 400. So see, that's the power of the EMP nuke, is that it's not going to kill them, but it's going to just subtract all their value. And so that's why it's still, even though it's not going to kill your fighters, it's still very important to intercept. And the counterplay for it's a lot harder because it's so cheap. So you have to spread your fighters way, way further. Now, when you're playing with premium fighters, they cost 103. Like, at least mine do. Some people play with them a lot smaller because that's how they prefer them. And they're a little bit more maneuverable, but I've only been able to get them up to like 550, which getting 50 more meters a second at this speed when they can already catch everything doesn't matter. Let's see. Now, what you can't do with them is you can't run a single one of these into an EMP nuke. It doesn't work. The EMP nuke costs less than the fighter. So if it makes contact with one fighter and it dies, that's that nuke's job done. It made value. It's happy. So you see, it got this fighter. Now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna direct this fighter back to base, and I'm gonna use waypoints to do that. So you can set its movement once, hold shift, then click movement again, and once it gets to here, it'll move to there. So that's a cool, neat little thing. So how to kind of counteract that, because the nuke's really, really good, but so is the fighter, is you kind of want to use your other fighters to cover it as it retreats. And that's part of the counterplay to EMP nukes, is that they don't kill it, so you have time to retreat and cover with the other ships. So if you were to spawn in a bunch of fighters right now and try and kill this one that's out of power, I would have 14 other 14 other premium fighters to kill it. Kill fighters he spawns to kill mine. And since they're so maneuverable, if you focus fires this one, they're going to be coming in, and I'm just going to swoop in from the side here and kill them all. Yeah, so let's show that. So I send in one fighter, it gets nuked. I try and run it away, it gets nuked. Now, if you focus fire it, look at that, your fighters all have to turn around. And that's kind of... So despite the fact he landed the nuke in that scenario, I still came out on top because I killed more dollar value worth of units. Which is kind of what the game's all about at this point, is just killing more dollar value than your opponent. I mean, it's not everything, but it definitely helps when you're thinking of with fighters. Is I can bring this one fighter in here, and this is a very good strat to do. It's like if your opponent's just sitting here doing jack shit, you come in with one fighter and you try and hit as many nukes as you can with it. So like these EMPs right here, I'll just come and try and hit as many of those as I can. And because they don't kill it, I make really good value on it. So you kind of actually have to, he would actually have to spread the EMP nukes to avoid that. Not a bad thing, actually. Having EMP nukes just kind of sprinkled in your fleet really deters fighters. Alright. So with basic fighters, like all the types of fighters that I've used in the past and that are good, covered, and nukes and like their counterplay to fighters and all that, and that relationship covered. But let's get into an actual game of Istrolid here. So we'll both be trying here, and hopefully I can show you an emphasis on fighter gameplay and um, and how to use your fighters to come out on top, even though in a scenario where it might not seem successful. So let's do that. So like I'm gonna swap out to my normal fleet with the normal types of fighters I use in it. That's this one. So normally, what I use as my standard types of fighters that I have in my main fleet are a normal light beam fighter, as I think it covers my weaknesses pretty well. A premium fighter because it's just so versatile and I can do things with it, and an auto torp fighter. Right now, this is kind of my fighter spot that I rotate. I'll occasionally have the double autocannon fighter in here because it accomplishes the same purpose, but they do it different ways, and depending on who I'm playing against, I'll swap it in and out. So let's start this game. Excuse me. All right. So my first thing I like to do when I get into a game is it's kind of being a little bit of game tutorial now, but I spawn 2 carriers generally as soon as I start, just because mine are so cheap. They're $350. It's not that big of an investment. All right. So what I'm doing now is I'm getting just 2 fighters right at the start, just to kind of go out and cap points to see, and just kind of probe around, see what he'll do in response. Now what I've decided right now is, okay, he's playing the fighter game. Oh, run. Oh no, are yours slightly lighter than mine? No? Okay. I'm gonna run this EMP nuke in here. See how it caught all those fighters? It just got them. Oh, that was bad. That was really bad on my part. So it's okay to, we're saying it's okay to use other ships other than fighters. So I'll actually spawn in some brawlers to provide cover for my fighters. So at some point you see how the fire game gets kind of like jumbled up like this. Like you both have a bunch of fighters, and I'm gonna try and force him to back off here with this nuke. Now see what, as we covered last episode, he's now forced to spread. So he's going to try and dive on my carrier here, which is a good choice. He lost all his fighters for it, though, which isn't worth it because I'm so close to home. Now, the thing when you're using fighters is that they're fast, and that's something you can take advantage of. So right there, he just absolutely destroyed my carrier. And not that, I don't really care that I get nuked there. I think that was just a waste of money on his part. Because I can run them into these torpedo meat shields to hide. Probably was a little unfavorable there. But I was close enough to my power that that the EMP nuke didn't really scare me that much right there. I'm still just going to try and be probing here and seeing what I can get with my fighters. Even as I advance, and it looks like I lost a bunch of them there. I still have $800 and a wall of torps to run behind. So we've kind of reached that point in the game where it's stagnant. I know he has a bunch of money, so I'm not going to be all gung-ho and rush in there, because that's just a bad idea. And I'll die if I run in there, because he's going to spawn a whole bunch of ships right on top of me, which is never good. Now what I've chosen to do here is I've chosen, since we've reached a point where I think I can brawl him, but I don't want to have to deal with pre-fire because I'll die if I do that, is I've chosen to go with premium fighters to try and make something happen here. Premium fighters are good because, for another reason, is that they can come in here and they can kind of snipe reinforcements. Almost got it. Oh shit. So even though you saw that that nuke was following me, you losing one is better than losing all of them. So I just chose to sacrifice the one fighter there because that nuke was going to catch me. Right, see, he spawned a bunch of nukes. So that's kind of something that's really hard to counterplay around, especially this EMP one, just because it's so cheap. Is I'm not really going to counterplay around it. What I'm going to do instead is I'm just going to make a whole bunch of other ships. So actually, what I'll do, I know what I'll do. Nope. See, I see what he's done here. He's put his EMP nuke in a position where it can just kind of come out. I'll be sneaky here. His EMP nuke is pointed towards these 2 points here, so it doesn't have to spend time turning, it can just go. So it's kind of looking real dangerous for me to engage onto. I'm not going to. I'll keep trying to cap these points with my fighters, but until one of us spends some more money, I don't really want to make a move because I could lose some ships here, and that's never good. Oh, messed up a little bit there on the micro. I was trying to run that fighter away so it wouldn't die to his 2 that he sent out after it. Yeah. So something that's very important with fighters is capping points, as they're so quick and get out to them so easy. Oh, I'm gonna get these 2 here. That's nice. Oh, I lost one. Okay, that's no good. Oh, the torpedoes got all his nukes. I didn't even notice that. So now that the torpedoes got all his nukes, I can move all my fighters out to take these points. And that's why I wasn't doing it before, is because I'm actually gonna get some nukes of my own here, because that's a lot of fighters, and they have really high DPS, but they shoot for like 4 seconds. So I think I got it from here. So what I'm going to do, and this is going to be a prime example where the auto fighters come in, is I'm going to spawn a buttload of auto fighters right now. I'm going to kind of split half off to this side, and I'm going to split the other half off to this side, and I'm moving with the brawlers. Now you see what's happening is the brawlers are going to provide a distraction, or the auto fighters are going to provide a distraction. In either case, I am not disappointed. Ooh. There you go, see? You see that? I just microed all those fighters away and saved them from that nuke. Because with these premium fighters, it's very important to just make sure you kill the nukes as they come in. If you sacrifice 1 or 2 here or there, it's not a big deal, especially against these normal nukes. It doesn't really matter. So in recap here, auto fighters are for when you're lazy and can't micro them all. Any standard fighter, standard fighters are autocannons, demi-spinal light beams, and light beams. They're kind of meant to just get map control and mid-flight come in to deal lots of damage to stuff. Your more specialty fighters like EMP and torpedoes are they're very counterable. But if you play your cards right, the opponent won't know they're coming, and they'll just die because you swarmed them with auto torpedo fighters, and they're fast and they get across the map quick, and they deal their DPS. They deal a lot of DPS real quick, and they can do it for a while. This torpedo only costs 1200 energy to fire, and it does 22 damage coming from the side, so they can't shoot it down with heavy point defense or anything. And the EMP fighters depower stuff, so I'm not a particular fan of it, but some people are, and it works real well for them. So that was Fighters Part 2. Advanced Fighters, anti-nuking procedures you can do with them. How to use auto fighters. how to kind of use nukes for anti-fighter purposes, which is especially these EMP nukes. They're insane. They don't require a carrier because that their engines don't take that much power. So that was Fighters Part 2. Thank you.